Oh my gosh, screen tells me the webinar has started. Hello, everybody.
Already there are people here. How exciting.
I know, look at that. There's the people who were lined up to get a seat in the front row. You want to be there, get a good
The
spot.
most
They're going to put out a
insider of
code, save some seats
insiders.
for friends.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there, guys. So while everybody's coming in and getting situated, welcome to the Insider. Welcome to this week's edition. We're doing something a little bit different. So we kind of called it Meet Our Team. We're going to take a little bit of a different approach, right? We keep liking to change things up and give you guys some more interesting content, more interesting nuggets that we can provide. Before we dive into it, a couple quick housekeeping things. Everybody should know this by now, right? But we are recording the session for today. It will be available in the Virtuous Support Center. That's where all of the recordings of all of the Insider sessions are available. You can go ahead and watch the replay, share it with friends, put it on a big screen in your backyard, however you like to watch the Insider. Everybody is muted for today. That way we can get some, hopefully, good quality audio. But if you have a question as we go through, please go ahead. Now, you'll see us in the chat. We'll be in there hanging out. But if you have a question, you want to make sure that it gets answered, please put it into the Q&A box. You'll see it in the little control panel there. That way, if there is a lot of lively chat going on, we don't miss that question. We can make sure that we get it answered for you. We'd love to be able to do that. And of course, as usual, I'm using the we pronoun. So you've got me. Anyone doesn't know me, I'm Scott Richards, Director of Training here at Virtuous. I'm joined by Megan Donahue, expert webinar host and interviewer. Hi, Megan.
Hey.
And we have a featured guest for today, which is always exciting. So we have special effects even in the slides for Shivani. Shivani is a newer, not newest, but newer member of the Virtuous team, and had a really compelling story from her days in the nonprofit trenches. How you doing, Shivani?
Good. How are you? Glad to be here.
This is awesome. I find it exciting, at least for me. So yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be great. So for today, in terms of the agenda, Megan and Shivani are just going to have a little bit of a chat about one of the really successful campaigns that she was able to run and what sort of tactics she used to be able to do that. And then we'll take a look at some of the tactics Shivani was able to use and how you can actually do some of the same things in Virtuous. How can I use some of those same tips and tricks? And certainly, if you have questions, ask them. We'd love to answer them. Shivani is here to answer your questions. She's an expert as well. Megan is awesome with questions, so we're all here. And then we'll wrap things up for another week. It goes faster than you think. So with that said, Megan and Shivani, I will turn things over to you for a little chat.
Great. Well, thanks, Scott. I'm really excited to have this conversation because one of the things that I think is pretty great about Virtuous, we just get on these calls and tell you things we think are great about ourselves, is that like everyone in Virtuous is in your corner, but at least half of us have also been in your shoes. As far as like, we have a lot of folks with nonprofit backgrounds and a lot of stories and times of like, we've been there looking at year-end campaigns, which I'm sorry, I have to bring up year-end campaigns, but it's September. So that's the law that I have to say it's year-end season is coming like every time I talk to anyone. So I'm excited to share this story that Shivani has for us, because when we were talking about it, I thought like, that's exactly the kind of thing that when I was a fundraiser, I would want to know, how did you do that? And why doesn't it work that way when I do that? Shivani, tell me all your secrets. So to kick things off, Shivani, can you tell us a little bit about your role at your last organization?
Yeah, so I was the director of development at an organization here based in Orange County. It was called the Youth Center. So I was responsible for all things fundraising, all things donor relations, and all things grant writing.
So all the hats.
Yes.
All the money is up to you.
Yeah.
Great. And so you were doing that role, in that role during pandemic times, right, as well. So, and
yes.
Does this story come from those times?
Yes, it does.
Great. So you launched a campaign and I would love to hear more about it. What inspired this campaign and then how did it work?
Yeah, so the Youth Center was an after-school program where we provided tutoring and after-school care for children and youth under the age of 18. So from the age of 5 all the way to the age of 17, we had various programs that incorporated STEM programs, reading literacy, homework and tutoring, and we had our older kids help with basically mentoring some of our younger kids. And it was a really cool little program that we had set up. However, during the pandemic, obviously we were shut down. We could not offer after school care. Later, halfway through, well, not even halfway through, let's be real. I would say in June of 2020, we were able to open up for our parents who were healthcare workers. And so they could leave their children with us. Mm-hmm. During that time, we realized that the kids were really struggling with things like their mental health, things like dealing with, distance learning and school. And they just didn't know how to cope anymore with Zoom school. Zoom fatigue was real for our poor kids. So what we wanted to do is really kind of create a campaign around keeping kids healthy and safe, both physically and mentally. And that was the whole goal of this campaign that we were running. And that was the idea that was born out of it. And then we had to figure out, okay, how are we going to now use that idea and then find our peer-to-peer fundraisers to help us spread that mission to be able to secure funding for our campaign.
Excellent. So had you done a peer-to-peer campaign before?
So I've been, in my previous experiences, I did a lot of program work at my other nonprofits. So I was involved in some peer-to-peer campaigns, but I never ran one. So this is my first time running an actual campaign by myself.
Mm-hmm. And how did it go?
It went really well. So we had a goal set for us to hit $150,000, and we were able to, at the end of 1 month of campaigning with 40 peer-to-peer campaigners, we were able to raise $239,000, which was a huge success, especially for me. So I'm definitely proud of that success because it being my first campaign I ran by myself, I thought 150 was a big ask, but we were able to surpass it. So it was very exciting.
So this is what I mean, where I want the details of results like that, of like your first time out on your own and you exceed your goal by that much. So what kinds of engagement were you doing? Because 40 fundraisers is a lot, but it's not so many that it's like, oh yeah, of course you exceeded your goal.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the success contributed to the fact that I was very hands-on in the whole process. Mm-hmm. I created a lot of materials, just giving and it wasn't even, it didn't take too much of my time. It was just, let's create a one-pager with different mission stories that the youth center has to share, that we can share with our peer-to-peer fundraisers, that when they're going out and having these conversations with their friends, families, loved ones, they can accurately talk about the youth center and our impact. And so we created those materials. Then I created a quick, 1-minute video that just intros the youth center, talks a little bit about what we do, and then encourages anyone that's interested in learning more to reach out to me so I can have further conversation. My whole goal with this was, yes, I want to get new donors, but I also want to make sure that those new donors have some value. They're going to come to us, but we want to make sure that we're not just taking their money, but they know where their money is going, number one. And number two, they actually feel like they're connected to our mission because we wanted more supporters, essentially. We wanted to grow locations. We had one location that was very community focused. So this was a great way for us to start building our network outside of just the community of Los Alamitos that we were in. Mm-hmm. So creating those materials were huge. And then as soon as the peer-to-peer fundraisers were starting to gain success and traction with securing donations, whether it was $5, $10 or $1,000, I would pick up the phone and call those individuals saying, hey, I saw that you donated to Pat's fundraiser. Thank you so much for donating. I'd ask them how they know Pat. Maybe it's their aunt, maybe it's their friend or their neighbor. And I would just start to get to know them a little bit better. And that way, towards the end, we sent them very personalized handwritten thank you cards. And we were able to we just got a lot of great response. People were like, the thank you note was just so nice. We loved that, you asked me about my vacation that I went on, right before the end of the campaign. So it was just a very personalized approach that I took.
That's really interesting. And I think I see you doing several things there that we talk about here at Virtuous all the time. It's like you have a multi-channel approach, right? Because you have you're using the phone, you're using the mail, you're using the relationships they have with another human being. So it's not just like you sent a thing, you made a donation to a friend's page, you get a semi-anonymous email saying, thanks, here's your tax receipt. Instead, you had like relationship building across channels going, right. Which like, that's inspiring right there. And what I see you doing there too, that's really interesting, is transitioning from, I think a lot of times with peer-to-peer, definitely things I've encountered with peer-to-peer, is that you build the relationship with the fundraisers. Right. But then they maintain their relationships with their people separately. And the whole thing is like, yeah, I gave to my friend's fundraiser. So like, Tom is the fundraiser who is my neighbor. He asked me to give to some nonprofit that sounded not evil. So I gave them, $20. And then I get the thank you note and I'm like, who is that? Oh yeah, it was Tom's thing, etc. That couldn't happen to your people because they got a phone call from you.
Right. Yeah,
starting a relationship.
Exactly. And that was the main thing. It was like, I wanted to get to know, I think the whole thing stemmed from, because it was so new to me, I just wanted to get to know who was giving and why, what sparked it. Yes, you have a friend, like for example, Tom, but how can we get you to join Tom in his efforts to volunteer with us? We don't know, like I wouldn't know that unless I actually talked to them. So I was trying to build a lot of personal relationships.
Interesting. So what happened afterwards, after you made those initial contacts? How did it work as an acquisition channel?
Yeah. So after that campaign was done, we ran our golf tournament a couple months later. And so with that, a lot of our donors were asking, hey, I want to play. I want to form a team. I would love to play with my friends and, some other family members. Our golf tournament, we allowed youth to play. So they wanted to play with their kids and their grandkids. And they were like, how do I sign up? And so we were able to get golfers, which was great. And through that too, some of those donors were able to connect us with employers that they were working at that actually then became sponsors for our golf tournament. And we were able to underwrite all the expenses of our golf tournament, which was great because the majority of the money that we raised, which was $25,000 at the golf tournament, we were able to put towards the scholarships for low-income families that really can't afford after-school care. And then we could take that cost for them and allow their kids to enroll in the program.
Fantastic. So more programs, more people served, and more supportive relationships.
Definitely.
That's just a total win on so many levels.
Yep.
So do you have any tips for people who are considering a peer-to-peer approach maybe in the coming months?
Yeah, so I would recommend just not being afraid to do it. I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to do peer-to-peer, I don't want to dabble in it. It sounds like it's a lot of work. But really, if you think about your strategy and you think about what do I want at the end of this, if it's, getting more supporters, volunteers, or just getting more awareness for your organization, don't be afraid to utilize some of your longtime volunteers and supporters to go out there and spread your mission. Like they are probably already talking about you anyway. Now let's just transform that into long-term support and try to also put together materials ahead of time. And in a way, you kind of have to handhold your volunteers and your supporters to just say, it's not that hard. You're basically probably unconsciously already talking about our mission, but these are just some of the main stories that we want you to touch on. So it can really show your friends and your family, or even your coworkers, what impact we're making, and to help us continue towards our mission. So materials creation ahead of time, really that personalization touch. So once you actually start seeing those donations come in, whether it's you or someone from your organization that can thank them for that donation, it really does mean a lot to them when you pick up the phone and call them. And oftentimes I would get voicemails, but I would get a call back saying, I really didn't expect you to call me. So I wanted to call you back to say, thank you for calling me, And then from there, the conversation started to flourish.
That's really exciting. Thanks, Shivani, for sharing that story with us.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of great takeaways.
There are too many to capture, right? This is when we're like, oh, why did we make this so short? We should do a longer session. But yeah, I think that the things that really stand out, when you listen to all of that, are number one, the prep work that you put in ahead of time to really arm those fundraisers. And I think that right now, when you think of peer-to-peer, certainly for folks who are not in the nonprofit space, especially, they think of the Facebook fundraiser. Like, oh, my cousin, for her birthday, she asked for donations for Miss Kitty's cat rescue. And so I chipped in like $10 on Facebook. Right. And that's there's not a lot of forethought there. That's just somebody liked that organization. But for you to put together those materials, like you said, kind of coach people up a little bit, arm them with talking points and how to do this, and give them some light fundraising coaching, that investment paid off, right? As opposed to, oh my gosh, we just asked some people and hopefully they'll talk to their friends about it. And then the big thing to me is that personal connection right away. Phone calls are so valuable, because I think that, right now we're conditioned to think, oh, nobody wants a phone call. They're invasive. People are screening their calls and they don't want to hear from a human being. And the truth is, most of the time you don't, because someone's calling to let you know your car warranty is about to expire and I don't want to talk to that person. But then when they hear you and they're like, wait, I care about you. Like, this is awesome. I had no expectation you were going to call me. Like, of course those people are going to call back and be surprised. And in hearing how this worked for you as an acquisition strategy, I think there's a lot of people go into peer-to-peer thinking it's going to be a great acquisition sort of tactic, and then it's not, right? Because like Megan said, people are connected to Tom, their neighbor. They don't know anything about you. And so later on, what happens is they might get a tax receipt, and then like 6 months later, a year later, they get an appeal mailer, and they're like, I don't even know who that org is. Yeah. And, too much time has elapsed, but the fact that you jumped on it right away, you built that, like you said, hey, we built a relationship with them. We knew we had to do it right then and there. That is huge. And I don't think everybody is really taking that same approach when it comes to peer-to-peer. But my gig right now is to kind of tie this into Virtuous a little bit. And that's why Megan did such an excellent segue, tossing it to me. Thank you very much. Professional host. And there are a few things that we can take away from this that we can do in Virtuous. So let me go back to sharing my screen. I think, there we go. There we are. So I'm here in Virtuous. So number one, and probably the most critical, I suppose, when we talk about all this, is the ability to track peer-to-peer giving in Virtuous. So while you don't think of Virtuous as being necessarily a peer-to-peer platform, there's certainly platforms that exist out there that are just do that. That's their bread and butter. That's their specialty. Even if I'm using another platform, I want to be able to track the peer-to-peer giving. I want to be able to track the impact of that in Virtuous, and you can do that within the Virtuous campaign structure. And I'm gonna get there kind of backing in. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look up a contact record here. Sorry, I just bumped my microphone. I hope I didn't deafen everybody. We're going to bring up Matt Murdoch. Good guy. And he is a donor. He's given us, 11 gifts, but he's also a peer-to-peer fundraiser in his own right. And so if I go to his giving tab, I can see a few things. I can see the giving that Matt has personally, what he's given to us as a donor, right? Certainly if I wanted to see his pass-through gifts, I could see that he hasn't given anything through a family foundation or something like that. But I can also come over here and see any of his peer-to-peer influenced gifts, meaning gifts where he is the fundraiser. He is one of those 40 people that Shivani armed and gave a bunch of materials to, and then sent out there into the world to kind of, do some fundraising on their own. And this is being driven by a feature that's built into our campaigns, and specifically to segments and segment codes, right? Everybody knows when you enter a gift in Virtuous, every gift should have a segment code, so I know where that gift came from. How did I raise it? How did I ask for it? But sometimes the answer to how I asked for it is I didn't, right? Tom, the neighbor, the hypothetical neighbor, did. And so first name Tom, last name hypothetical. He went out there and did that fundraising. So I would need to have a contact record for Mr. Tom hypothetical here. And from his contact record down here, you can see there's this section for peer-to-peer segments. Here's Matt's peer-to-peer segment. And if I wanted to create a new peer-to-peer segment or add a new segment for Matt, I can do it right from here. I can select any existing segment on any one of my Virtuous campaigns, or I can create a brand new segment right here for him. I'll choose what campaign communication it's going to be part of. And then I can create this with a new segment name and a new segment code, and that's going to tie it directly in this case, to Matt. And once I do that, then I will see it down here. And again, I'll start to see all these gifts. Any gift that has that segment code, I know Matt is the one who raised it. And of course, not only can I see this here, I can query and report on gifts based on the fundraiser, right? So I can see for all those 40 people, Shivani would be able to build a custom report and see at a glance, right? Hey, which of those folks is raising the most money, right? How are my sort of my squad doing out there in terms of raising money for us? Now, if I'm on the campaign itself, I can do the same thing. And I can do this when I create a campaign. I can do it when I create a segment. It's totally fine. So I don't know, this one sounds interesting. It's a little old, but Spring Fling, gotta like that. So in here, if I was gonna do a new peer-to-peer campaign, let's just, oh shoot, none of these really fit. So we'll just say it's gonna be here. But when I go to create a new segment, so I can give the segment a name, I can give the segment a code, right? It's got to have a unique code. We know all of that. But down here, I can search for a specific contact and I can assign them here as the fundraiser. So this is the same thing we were doing when we added the segment code on the contact record, except the reverse. I can come in here and search and add them from here. And then I'll be able to track, again, how much they've raised. Now, if I wanted to take this a step further and I was using, for example, Virtuous Giving, right? I might want to be able to give these folks their materials and even say, and hey, here is your personal fundraising link. Here's a URL, and I want you to share this with your friends. You can post it on social media. You can email it to your family email list so that Aunt Myrtle will see it too. And you're going to ask everybody to make a donation. Okay, because in Virtuous Giving, what you want to remember is I can come in here and I can create as many different donation forms as I want to, as many different giving forms as I want to, right? Within that form builder, totally fine. But then the key is once I've built out my form, I can take that form and I can embed it in my website and I can have a specific page that's just my peer-to-peer fundraising page. But then I can also add additional values to the gifts that are processed there by building them into a custom URL. And actually the easiest way to see this is in our support section. We've got a handy dandy article that goes over some of this here in terms of using custom URLs to set codes and set values and things like that. So if you have a giving form here, we use this URL, example.org/give. That might be where you just have your general donation form. You can create a peer-to-peer segment. I can create one for Megan. I can create one for Shivani. Congratulations. You guys are both peer-to-peer fundraisers along with Tom Hypothetical. And then I can send them their materials as a fundraiser and say, and by the way, here is your personal URL for fundraising, because I can add the segment code to that URL. And so then Megan and Shivani and all the other, Tom and all the other 37 people, they're going to send people to the same donation page, the same form that talks about, the benefit of all of this. But each time they do that, right, when their friends and family make a gift, I know that what's being credited to Megan, I know what's being credited to Shivani, I know what's being credited to Mr. Hypothetical and to everybody else that's driving their friends and family through that page. And so if you're going to do the work that Shivani did and you're going to prepare all of your fundraisers for this, this would be one of the things that you can give them or you can arm them with. And then certainly after the fact, right, you can take advantage of automation. So if all of this is being driven to a specific communication, which it should be, or a specific campaign, I can create an automated workflow that looks for any gifts that come in that are tied to that communication, right? Whatever that peer-to-peer communication is that has all those 40 fundraisers under it, each with their own segment. And so that automation can fire off a task so that if I want to use this as an acquisition strategy and I want to build that personal connection, I want to be giving those phone calls specifically to those folks giving to the peer-to-peer campaign, I can have automation fire off a task for me to make sure that I reach out and I give them a call. Right. I could also use letters on demand to make sure that we're sending personalized letters as follow-up and things like that. And I think the big key here, again, that you use, Shivani, which is really powerful, is instead of having that thank you and that follow-up come from Tom Hypothetical or anybody else, immediately the follow-up came from you, and you immediately had that personal touch to make sure that you didn't waste any time building that relationship, right? Which I think we all think to ourselves, hey, if I'm going to do an automation thank you follow-up for peer-to-peer, it's got to come from the fundraiser. Well, that might be nice, put that face on it, but this is also your chance to introduce yourself and build that relationship, which is really powerful. And so you can have a workflow set up to make sure that you're not missing those things and not missing those opportunities as they come through. And then maybe even if someone gives it a certain level, following up with an email that asks them if they want to become a fundraiser for you in their own right, or if they want to take that action, that next step. And if you want to keep that personal touch, if you want to keep that sort of approach, don't forget that not only can you use automation to send emails, right? Have the workflow send the email itself. Here's our really, really new life cycle. But for any of these follow-ups, you can also use the ability to create a task and use a personalized email template, which really kind of splits the difference, right? Between having automation send the email and having a human being do it. So I can come in here and say, hey, I want to do this new donor welcome template, and I can assign that task to a team member. Once they get that task assigned, it'll pop up with that email template. And that'll open in their email program. They can customize it, a little bit of an additional note, and they can send it off. So again, it is a little bit more personal, but you're also got some rails on there. You don't have to sit down and think about, well, what am I going to say to this person? Because most of it's templated out for you. Okay. Like I said, too much to fit in. I wanted to get into a few of those. We had a few questions that came in as you guys were talking and going through some things. So we chatted. I chatted with a few folks there. I haven't seen any other questions coming through, which is probably a good thing, just given the time. Oh no, now I've lost everybody. There we go. So I do want to just make sure we run out of time here. I remind everybody that you can join us every week. Next week is going to be our hour-long edition of The Insider. That's our big training extravaganza, where we want to make sure we take that full hour to take a deep dive. And you can see all the past episodes. We've done deep dives on giving data. We did an entire hour talking about notes and tasks and other things that we don't always get the time to really explore fully. So I really like being able to still do that. And as always, I like to leave you guys with some words from someone smarter than me. Sorry, Megan, I didn't get to let you say smarter than Scott.
Oh, that's okay.
And so for this week, I actually thought this was really neat. This is a quote that I think is really applicable to a lot of the things we were talking about today, a lot of Shivani's story. And this is specifically talking about crowdfunding, a little bit more in the business sense, but it applies across the board. Crowdfunding, peer-to-peer fundraising, a lot of shared DNA there. The unique value of crowdfunding is not money it provides. It's community. That's really the key. And that's what we did here right now. I mean, yes, you raised a ton of money and more than your goal, and that was good. Like, we wouldn't be talking about it if you were like, yeah, we didn't hit it, right? You hit it, you went over it, you left it behind you. But the other thing was you started to really build that community so that was just a starting point and you could keep going from there, which is really the value. And this comes from Ethan Mollick. He is a professor at the Wharton School, and he's actually got a book and a few other things talking about crowdfunding. Some really interesting stuff. So we are at the end of another edition of The Insider. Before I let everybody go, Megan, Shivani, any words of wisdom, anything that you want to leave everybody with? Megan, why don't you go first?
Sure. I think my big takeaway is however you can look to personalize something, even if you can't do it at every step, even if you can't do it perfectly, finding new ways to personalize one more thing can really still have a big impact.
Love it.
And to piggyback off of that, Megan, is have fun with it. Your supporters and your community, they want to see you. They want to see your personality. So just if you pick up the phone and you crack a joke and you make someone laugh, that's great. That's a great first step. It starts to take down that wall. So don't be afraid, and just figure out what you want and make it happen. And it doesn't have to all be perfectly thought out. So just go out there and try it. You'll learn from your experiences.
I believe that everything should be serious all the time. There's no room for joking around.
Totally.
We don't want to do that here. No. Well, hey, Shivani, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I really like this. I think it was fun, and I think it's a great story to be able to share. So hopefully some folks got some great stuff out of it. Thank you, Megan, for being the expert interviewer, as always. Love having you on The Insider. And thank you, everybody else. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you all next week.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.